Chairman and CEO of Ernst & Young, Jim Turley.
Dan, thank you very much. I guess I need to be careful where they have cameras and are recording what I say, but that is exactly what I said in Detroit. At first, before I get started, Father John, David, to all of you, thank you. I had not known of Lumen, before I was asked to speak here, and getting to learn about you has been outstanding. And I want to thank Lumen for what you do. There's not that many organizations that focus the way you focus. There are a lot of people that talk and focus about leadership, and I think that's vital, but that's not unique. I think it is much more unique to have an organization that focuses on the faith-based aspects and the character aspects of leadership, and that is terribly, terribly needed in today's world. And I think Lumen takes it to the next step and really, drills that down into all aspects of people's lives, whether it's in the business world, whether it's in the faith world, whether it's at home, and becomes really part of who people are. And so I think that what you are doing is incredibly important. Having said that, I've been trying to figure out, why I'm dreading speaking with you. But it's fascinating. I spend a lot of time speaking to groups, not just all around this country. You mentioned the Economic Club in Detroit on Monday, but speaking with groups all around the world. And I think the reason this one feels so hard and so different is it's much more personal, it's much more revealing, it's much more contemplative, I guess. When Father John and I got together to sort of begin to teach me a little bit about Lumen, it was interesting because since that time and leading up to today and thinking about what I wanted to talk about, it does cause a person to reflect and to contemplate and to think about, where did my values come from? What shaped me? Where did my faith come from? All of these things. And so let me just walk through that a little bit. Probably like a lot of you, it starts with parents. I suspect everyone would say that. My father, we were talking a little bit beforehand, was and is a very successful business executive in St. Louis in the commercial real estate field. And what's interesting is I remember thinking back and hearing when I was a child about the success, but the success I heard about, it wasn't this transaction or that deal or anything else. It was primarily around everybody trusted him. Everybody respected him. And it was also within the firm, Turley Martin Company, it's one of the biggest commercial real estate businesses in the Midwest. The employee base respected him and loved him. And so it was not just the senior executives, it was everybody. And so to me, that was success. Beyond parents, I think it was church. My mother and father and family grew up in the Episcopalian Church. Unlike many of you here, I'm not Catholic. I spent a lot of time thinking that Episcopalians were like Catholic light or something, but it was. But what was interesting is, mom and dad are very, very devout, as am I. My mother probably drives that more than my father. Mothers have a very interesting way, even though I'm 50 years old, of making you feel bad. And so, what are you laughing at, Deborah? One of the mothers in the room. I spend a lot of my time traveling, which means that it is not at all infrequent that I am out of town on a Sunday. Unlike my mom and dad, who, when they're traveling, always, doesn't matter where they are, find an Episcopalian church to go to. I have to admit, I don't make the same effort when I'm traveling by myself or with my wife. And so, mothers have a way, just sort of to twist the knife a little bit, because I'll talk to them every weekend, and Mom will say, "Oh, where are you? Did you go to church?" Well, it's okay. Don't worry. Don't feel too bad. I know you do when you're in New York. But one time, One time in my life, I got her. And it was actually very interesting because I called her, it was Sunday afternoon in St. Louis, and Sunday afternoon. She hears I'm traveling, she knows that she's gonna say, did you go to church? And so I beat her to the punch. I said, Mom, I didn't go to church today. She gives me the, oh, it's okay, it's okay. I said, but over the last day and a half, I've walked through the Garden of Gethsemane, I've been to the Sermon on the Mount, I've touched the place where the cross was buried. She was, whoa! She didn't know I was in Jerusalem. But, so I got a pass from her one day. But church, obviously, very, very important. Early youth, Boy Scouts is very important to me. You know, I was in Scouts for a long time as a young boy, and then I went something like 35 years without being part of it at all. And I moved to New York and was asked by the Boy Scout Council here to be one of their honored Good Scouts. Don't know why they picked me. I think it was a fundraising gig or something. But it's interesting, as I got there and I found myself 35 years later being able to talk about how a Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. 35 years later. And what's interesting is how these things stick with you. Without question, that was important. Sports were very important. I was talking to many of the folks here before. You learn an awful lot about teamwork. You learn an awful lot about sacrifice. And the last thing that I think really seemed important to me was when I was at college. I went to Rice University in Houston, and Father John and I were talking about this when we had lunch. Rice has an honor system. It operates on one, and believe it or not, even today, it really works. There's only one test everybody who graduates from Rice has to pass, and that's the test to get in. It's the test that makes sure that you understand the honor system, how it works, and if you don't abide by it, they're going to toss you out. And I didn't think much about that until the end of my freshman year, first semester, when, sort of strange for a new kid in college, they said, okay, Jim, you're taking these 5 classes. When would you like to take your finals? And I thought, this is strange. So you got to self-schedule your finals. And so that's kind of neat. The ones I needed more study time for, I pushed later off. Earlier ones I took early. And so then they tell you, you go to this building, that room, you'll take that final. So far, so good. Then you get to the room, and you realize that everybody in the room is taking a different final. There's a student who's passing out the final exams to you, and again, you take your test, whatever, 3 hours, you go back to your room, and then it dawns on you that your roommate is in the same class, taking the exact same final you just took, and he's taking it 3 days from now. You don't say a word. So the freedom, I think, that honor and trust and respect gives you really came alive in a real way. So all these things shaped me. You each have incredible stories about what shaped you. What dawns on me is how lucky I was to have had things that shaped me for what became, I think, the most important time for me. I couldn't stand up here and not talk a bit about the scandals that our profession and the financial markets have lived through, because without question, timing is everything. I was asked to become the CEO of Ernst & Young effective the 1st of July, 2001. I know no one here has been sleeping underneath a rock. You know that an awful lot changed shortly thereafter. I remember having internet, web-enabled teleconferences with all of our partners on about December of '01 and just filling them in on all that was happening in the profession. People could email in questions, and this one woman emailed in a question. She said, Jim, you've led our firm for almost 6 months now. And in that time period, we've experienced the deepest recession the country has seen in decades. We've experienced, particularly here, in many ways, war declared on the United States September 11th. And now, after Enron, we're experiencing war being declared on the profession. My question is, are you having fun yet? So I stepped back and I was very pleased because I thought she was going to blame me for all those things. But the scandals have shaped everything, and I do want to talk about them. There's been an enormous loss in confidence in every player in the financial markets, whether it's companies, whether it's management teams, whether it's boards of directors, whether it's firms like ours, whether it's institutions of all type. Enormous loss in confidence. And while I want to talk about the scandals today, I don't want to do it the way I normally talk about, which is why they might have happened and what should be done and what has been done to change things. But instead, I think I want to talk about the impact that those scandals had on our partners and staff, on me, on the firm, and really some of the choices, some of the decisions we made as a result of those scandals. You go back to when I took the leadership of the firm, and some things are safe to say. It was a very sales-driven organization, without question. Every partner, every staff knew that. We had for years been one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing, professional services firm. We had very strong financial performance. We had a pride that we thought was pride at that time. Looking back, it was arrogance. It was just flat arrogance. And it's true what Dan said, quoted me from before. While quality and integrity was front and center when I joined in '77, and while it was front and center when I made partner in '87, we, along with a lot of other people, had let quality and integrity become more implicit than explicit during the '90s, and that fundamentally had to change. The world had changed demonstrably, and we had to change as well. So we did a lot of things. First thing we did was very quickly change our strategy, adopted a very new strategy, one that was clearly built on 3 pillars: people, quality, and growth. And unlike before, we made it very explicit that this strategy only worked, in my words, from left to right. Having great people, the very, very best people, driving the best quality they possibly could to our clients, and delivering that quality in a very forthright way, and having that process give us the growth we need as an organization to invest, to build, and to continue to prosper. In the past, it would have been growth, 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 and as an afterthought, perhaps, people, do you have enough people to do the job? Is the quality right? Left to right, all of our people around the globe are thinking about it that way. Having that work, people first, then quality, and then growth, reinforced the cultural change we had put in place a couple years before that. A cultural change in which we call it within Ernst & Young, people first. And I have to tell you, when we started rolling that out in '99 or 2000, it was fascinating because we have thousands and thousands and thousands of skeptical people. You might imagine, auditors and tax people by their very nature are a little bit skeptical. And no one could believe we really meant it. And I remember the first time sitting in front of a group of CEOs telling them that we are putting people first, and knowing that, just like here, many of the people in the audience were executives of clients of ours, made me very uncomfortable until they came up to me afterwards and said, "You got it right." Because we know that when you delight your people, they're going to delight us. And so, despite the skepticism, we were able to begin to make that change. It was fascinating talking to our people in offices all around the country, in fact, all around the world, hearing the skepticism, openly discussing how people first doesn't mean people only. We'd all love to be able to sit at the shore all summer and get paid a lot of money, but we're a high-performance culture, but we want to think first in every decision we make. about the impact it's going to have on our people. So think first in the decision about how it impacts the people of Ernst & Young. And when we do that, it doesn't mean that every decision we make is for the benefit of our people, but we've at least thought about it. And we've made a conscious decision as opposed to an unconscious decision. And what's interesting is I was going around talking with our people about this, again, many of them very, very skeptical, light bulbs started to go off. And they realized the managers in our firm, people who were 26, 27, 28 years old, realized that the decisions that mattered most to the staff and seniors, the even younger people in the firm, were not the decisions that I made. They're not the decisions that our national and global leadership make. They're the decisions that they make on the job with their account teams every day. And so actually, people first stopped being some grandiose from the center thing and began being a team-based concept of understanding how we can support each other and really have teamwork at the account level to serve our clients, but also to make sure that our people can have lives and flexibility and succeed both at home and at work. So the entire people quality growth strategy reinforced the people first strategy. So we changed strategy, we also changed structure. We put in place a whole focused group around quality and risk management outside of the business lines, not part of the audit business, not part of the tax business or the transactions business, but a group that reported straight to me with a mandate of turning over every stone possible and making sure that they are not encumbered by trying to make money. And so it's been interesting when we put our first vice chair of quality and risk management in place, Sue Frieden. She was well known in the organization for being brilliant, for being a real bulldog, and for being a real pain in the butt. And it was precisely what we needed. Somebody who no one would question her integrity in saying directly to me, this is something we've got to fix. And so we did all this and made all these changes, frankly, without regard to money, without regard to other things, and she's just done a great job. So change strategy, change structure, change systems and processes. Through Sue's efforts and other efforts, we've scrubbed every practice, every process that could touch the delivery of quality in the marketplace. A lot of people think about it as being the methodologies we use, and certainly we did that. But it's everything from how we hire people, to how we train them, to how we deploy them and assign them to jobs, to how we review their performance and compensate them and promote them, which clients we will work with, which ones we will say no to. I know there's some KPMG partners in the room, they're doing the same things. I'm not saying that Ernst & Young has done something that they haven't. The whole profession has focused very, very heavily on that in the scrubbing of the processes. So we made those changes. And we changed the values. We spent a long period of time converging around a set of shared values that are truly global in nature. It was an ordeal, to be honest with you, because I don't know how many of you have gone through that process, but we had a group of people, and it took, golly, forever. They must have been working for 12 months around the values that could really define Ernst & Young. And I remember flying over to London for a meeting that was expected to be one of the worst meetings you'd ever go to, because there were just fights going on. How do they were trying to pick 3 or 4 or 5 words to identify the values of the firm. And we scheduled all day, and we didn't expect to get done, and it was almost divine how this meeting took place, because we sat down and in a very, very short period of time, just a touch over an hour, we walked out with a value statement that said the people of Ernst & Young are people who demonstrate integrity, respect, and teaming, people who have the energy, enthusiasm, and courage to lead, and people who build relationships based on doing the right thing. There were people from all around the world who had been literally fighting for 12 months trying to pick 3 or 4 or 5 words. And at the end of an hour, somehow, we had this statement. And it was fascinating. We all kind of looked at each other and said, I guess we're done. Bye-bye. So we called an end. It was just great. And finally, we changed really the mantra of the firm and brought back to Ernst & Young the line you see on any of our materials you might have, quality in everything we do. And all of these changes were happening like this. All of these changes were happening with, out the consultation in some cases, the collaboration, the getting the buy-in, but they were spot on and they were absolutely vital. And I think the impact in that was incredibly important. When I think about what the scandals did, though, I move back from the firm to the individual and think about what it did to our partners, what it did to our staff. Because it was something that was awful. And I'm not talking about partners or staff that were involved in any kind of scandals themselves. We've had a few. I'm not talking about the thousands of former Anderson people that joined our organization, who went through an enormous calamity, because for all those people, it was a living hell going through it. But I'm talking about tens of thousands of others and the tens of thousands of people elsewhere in the profession. Because more than anything, what these partners and other executives had to do was spend an enormous amount of time listening to our staff, talking to our people, answering their questions, helping them address their anxieties at a time when the partners themselves were mighty anxious. They had to have the same dialogue with their clients, answering questions, getting their clients to relax. And it's something that I think the strength that our partners showed, the strength that the other firm's partners showed was enormous. I lived through all that myself, and then plus had the joy of getting to visit with more regulators than I possibly could name, visit with more investor groups than I possibly could name, and visit with the media. And I think there was only one time when it really got personal, when it was personally hurtful. Sadly, it wasn't one time, it's one time that repeated itself. But it's when somebody moved from just asking questions to questioning the integrity of the firm or the profession. When someone moved from, how could you be so stupid as to not have seen the fraud that was taking place at Pick the Company, to, you must have been in on the fraud. And that's when it really got personal. And so, did you get angry? Of course, got very angry. But we worked through it, and it's why it was so important to change and change quickly. One of the things that I think our partners were very surprised about, well, two things. First, we made all these changes, as I said before, with a blank check, without a budget, without regard for how much we needed to spend, because we knew it was the right thing to do. We knew we fundamentally were doing what we had to do. We knew we had to pay for it. And we had the faith that doing the right thing was going to also work out business-wise. I think it was surprising to many of our partners, now several years later, that, guess what, we continue to be a firm that is one of the fastest growing market share in our profession. We continue to be a firm that we're experiencing record revenue and record earnings. And our partners and staff have the pride back. Not the arrogance that was there 4 years ago, but a professional pride. And so I think that surprised them at some level. I think the other thing that surprised them was the level of forgiveness that clients brought forward, that our clients were actually very forgiving. It didn't surprise me much. I'm not an overtly religious guy, but believe in a forgiving God and forgiving people. And I think that when anybody sees an organization of goodwill, sees an organization that's trying to do the very, very best they can, they're going to cut them some slack, that they're going to give them a break, that they're going to forgive them. And so it really didn't surprise me at all. I remember the first time that I was in any kind of senior leadership role within Ernst & Young. It was about 12 years ago. It was 1994. And I was asked to lead the Minneapolis practice for our firm. I'll never forget this. I'd been in town for 3 days. And the third night, there was a cocktail party, not that we had arranged, but that I was invited to. And at that cocktail party, I met the chairman and CEO of our biggest client. Not our biggest client by a little, but our biggest client by a lot. This was a big one. And what he said to me was something that was stuck with me. He said, Jim, he says, I know exactly what your job is like. And I looked at him and I said, Jack, well, tell me, please, because I've been in it 3 days and I'm still learning a lot. And he said that your job is like being the only fire hydrant in a 50-dog town. It got me thinking a bit, but the fact of the matter is he's right. And I had been, when all the scandals were hitting now, just a few years ago, the reason I had such great confidence in the forgiving nature of our clients is I had been the fire hydrant enough and knew that when you went to a client in a tough situation, there's one of two things you could do. You could either convince the client that they're wrong and you're right. Good luck with that strategy. Or you could basically plead guilty and ask for a light sentence. And there is no question in my mind that humility, admitting your mistakes, and apologizing will almost always be forgiven, because that's the nature of the people we are. And I think that surprised some of our partners that while the discussions were tough, the outcomes were very positive. Last thing I'll comment on, and then maybe throw things open for questions, is just talk a little bit about what I do every day. Because, you know, from my perspective, my focus is all around the culture of Ernst & Young. It's all around making sure that quality and integrity never become implicit again. And so you mentioned, Dan, we have 100,000 people. It's 107 roughly. And I try to think of my responsibility as being such that doing everything I can to make sure that all 107,000 wake up every morning, bottom line, knowing what's expected of them, knowing what's right, knowing what's wrong, knowing that no matter what, nothing is more important than their own integrity, not the biggest client they happen to serve, not the biggest client in their city or country, not the biggest client in the firm, not the meanest partner or the most hard-charging, hard-driving partner within the firm they might work with. Nothing is more important than their integrity. And that if something makes them feel funny, if something smells funny, it doesn't feel right, that it's not just okay for them to raise their hand and say, you know something, let's talk. This doesn't look right. It's not just okay for them to do that, it's their job for them to raise their hand. And if we can get that across 107,000 people, I'm going to feel very good. It's not a message you send out by BlackBerry that I left on the table. It's not a message you send out by voicemail. It's a message you send out face-to-face, not just me, but a variety of people, visiting with our people, visiting with our clients, and doing it eyeball to eyeball. Because at the end of the day, our people are going to make mistakes. Your people are going to make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes. But I think if you have the right focus, the right culture, the right integrity, the right values, then nothing's going to ever get the firm in real trouble. With that, let me stop. It's been a great honor to be here with you. And Father John, I'd be delighted to throw things open for questions or do whatever comes next here. You've told me about this a few times. I'm not exactly sure where it goes from here. There's one in the back. This is unfair because she's in our profession. Go ahead.
You've talked a lot about the changes in the accounting firms, and I agree with you. It always use expression of religion.
Yep.
What are your views with respect to the other elements of the capital markets, the corporate corporations, the investment bankers. Where do you think this? Do you think that this has also had an impact on your sense of integrity of business?
Well, look, I think it has. I think that I spend more time than you could possibly imagine, like you all do, with our clients. I like to say, and I think it's true, that I go to more audit committee meetings than any person alive. I would not recommend that to all of you. And from what I've seen, the culture at companies is enhancing. CFO of one of the biggest companies in the world said something to me that stuck with me. And this is not an audit client of Ernst & Young. It's also not an audit client of KPMG, so I wasn't poaching on one of yours. And what he said was fascinating. He had no reason to blow sunshine my way, but what he said was he believed that as a result of the cascading of the Section 302 certifications, the CEO and CFO responsibility to sign the accounts, which any good organization, and they're all doing it, cascades it to every business unit in every geography all around the world and gets relatively low-level people to share in the fun and to do that. That coupled with the cascading of 404, which a lot of people, you know, ourselves included, think was too expensive the first year, but it's had some also positive control benefits and cultural benefits. The cascading of those, he says, has gotten all of his people to understand that they make money the right way. The way he put it is, he said, this is a good company. He said, I used to have to sit down as CFO every quarter, pull out a hammer and pound down crazy ideas my own people were bringing me. Crazy ideas to defer expenses that should have been recognized revenue that hadn't been all the way earned yet. He said, my own people, they weren't trying to be fraudulent, they were just thinking that was the right thing to do. And he said, now they know we make money by developing great product, by shipping it, and by billing our customers. So I see the culture as enhancing, and I think it's a great positive. Yes?
Jim, two-part question. You said that the values of the company became more implicit than explicit in the 90s at the department. What would you say culturally triggered that, either in the company or in society? And secondly, the changes that you've implemented, what's your hope and how do you guarantee that they'll be permanent?
You know, I think that I'm always a little uncomfortable talking about the fact that quality and integrity became implicit in the 90s because I'm fearful that my predecessor is going to think I'm slamming him, and I don't mean to be. I think that society overall, we're going through a 10-year bull run which caused, pick the institution, everybody to suspend disbelief. You know, the good times, we're going to keep on rolling. And I think at some level, that causes everybody to then think more about growth than about quality. And so I think that's probably what led it. It was primarily societal, I think, overall. Why is it institutionalized? I think it's part structural, because we have people whose day jobs are extremely focused on helping us ensure that the culture and the focus stays what it is. They are not, you know, bought up, frankly, in trying to make money. They're not caught up in trying to have top line growth. They're caught up and focused on one thing, and they report to me as leader. I think it would be extraordinarily unlikely that that my successor, you know, would decide that he or she wants to do it differently. And so I think that part of it's institutional, but part of it's also the level of scrutiny we have. This is a profession that went from being 100% self-regulated 4 years ago to being 100% regulated today. And things that we used to do, standard setting, inspection processes, you know, we used to do peer reviews for KPMG or vice versa, and the others would review the other firms. Now we're inspected from the outside. Our partners are disciplined from the outside by the PCAOB. They're setting standards. We have absolute total transparency with them. Even if one of us lost our way and wanted to backslide, we'd hear about it pretty quick. So I feel pretty confident that these changes are here to stay. And by the way, as stressful as having a government-related regulator inspect you is, I think it's made us a better organization. We, as a firm, will learn things that KPMG or Deloitte or PwC might be doing better than us. I assure you they'll learn some things that we're doing better than them. And through that process, we're all going to continue to get better. That's what it's all about.
You mentioned that you have 107,000 people, and you want to make sure they all act with integrity. I'm sure the values of some of these people may differ. How are you guaranteeing that they all view integrity the same way, that they're kind of on the same page? Maybe some of them are France things
Yep.
some of them.
It's a real challenge. I would not say it exactly as you did. I wouldn't say their values differ. If you think about what we focus on, we had 3,500 of my closest friends in Florida at an international partner meeting, and the whole focus was delivering on our promise of seamless, consistent, high-quality service around the world, which is a challenge when you're across different cultures, across different regulatory systems, across different accounting and auditing systems. We're seeing a lot of convergence around accounting and auditing systems. I don't need to go into a tangent on that, but there's a lot of great progress being made there. We're actually seeing the regulatory frameworks of countries become harmonized. The regulators are talking today like they never have before. The cultures, to your question, will always be different. We try to bridge those cultures with the global set of values I talked about. Those were not just U.S. values. This is why it was such a divine moment when we had people from Asia, South America, Europe, you name it, together in London, and in an hour we were able to all commit to the same set of values. We underpin that with a global code of conduct that drills it down into more actionable items that we have our people sign every year. And so we try to bridge the cultures by things like values in the code of conduct. Put aside the consistent and common methodologies and technology and processes that we use around the world, that's a given. Making sure the cultures and values are as aligned as we can is important. Yes?
Just in visiting with you, Jim, you mentioned something just in passing as we were really just enjoying your view.
This is dangerous. Go ahead.
Enjoying your view of Lower Manhattan from your office. You said just in passing that it was designed not to have any corner offices. You didn't really elaborate. That was impressive to me. Just comment on that?
Yeah, we were moving into our building at 5 Times Square, Steve, we moved in 2002. We were designing it. Steve Howe, that leads our financial services practice, is at the table here, and Steve was on the planning group with me because I was the managing partner in New York when we began that. And we concluded that what we wanted to do was, because of the focus of Ernst & Young on teaming, to have the corner offices in every floor be team rooms or conference rooms, and make sure that we didn't get into a culture, strange shaped buildings. We have 6 corners on each floor. And I used to be good at geometry, but it's interesting how that works out. But so we decided that we're much better having team space as opposed to setting up an implicit hierarchy that so-and-so is more important than somebody else. I think it was an important step for us. Candidly, it also avoided what would be an enormous problem if you move 3,000 or 4,000 people and then try to figure out how to assign people to the corners. You talk about fighting egos at that time. There may have been a practical piece of that as well, but it's worked out very, very well for us, and I think it reinforced the culture of the firm.
Thank you.
One thing you did mention that struck me was when you did what was right despite skepticism within the company, despite perhaps what other people may think is the right thing to do, and not allowing others' opinions or perhaps vain thoughts, if you will, influence our decision to do what is right. And I think that is a great aspect of integrity. And when we're talking about integrity, we're talking about consistency between what one professes to be and how you live. That's how we define integrity here at Lumen in the Institute. And it is one of our core values of leadership, that we strive to communicate and help the senior executives live in their professional lives and their personal lives. Now, moral integrity, it is, to give you an example, it's like physical integrity. Physical integrity is like a bridge that within its construction, within its foundations, its crossbars, its struts, its cement foundations, there's no weaknesses, right? There are no cracks in the foundation. It is one, it is unified, it is undivided. You can trust it, whether it be the George Washington or what have you. It has physical integrity. It is one, undivided, it's consistent and strong. Moral integrity is the same thing. It is an individual who sticks by what he believes. Okay? He is, or she is, a person that says yes in private and yes in public. An individual who bases their decisions, their action that they will take based upon principle, based upon objective law, objective moral law, not emotions or sentiments or feelings, the moment. A person of integrity is not reactionary. They're action-oriented, because what serves them as their principles allows them to make the right action with consistency. Now, how do we grow in integrity? I'll give you 3 ways. 1, believe in integrity. Obviously, at Ernst & Young, Jim, you coming aboard brought that belief in integrity. And what is very telling is that a man's value system, the leader's value system, is constructed, it is built from when he's very young. Whether it be as a Boy Scout, with your mother and your father, at Rice University. It is obviously a building, a bridge that one is constructing in order to eventually bear the burdens, the stress, the anxieties, the challenges, the problems that leadership upholds. So integrity, that by basing my life upon principle, upon moral principle, objective moral principle, it will be a life worth living. It will provide me with meaning, with purpose, right? With a clear meaning and purpose of what I'm called to be as a leader. So believing in integrity is the first step. Secondly, living according to principles. That believing in, creating, having, understanding my set of principles, whether it be I adopt my corporation set of principles, or Lumen Institute's set of core principles. But these principles be, if you will, the pillars of this skyscraper that I'm building. They be the cement pillars, the foundation, the seamless, the crackless, without weakness, that I build my entire life, personal and public. So, what are my principles? And then thirdly, being faithful to my conscience. Ultimately, the conscience is like the GPS system that takes me down the path of right living. It is like a homing device that takes me to where I want to go with its truth in all things. Truth in all matters. So my conscience is also, it's a gift. God-given gift. That God gives us in order to discern what is right and wrong in my thought life and my active life, to objective moral law. And if I'm a Christian, Christian teaching, or my the faith that I profess according to my faith's tradition. It is essential that the faithfulness to the conscience, we understand, is the path to happiness and right living. The Catholic Church offers probably the most profound and in-depth study of moral virtue, of the conscience, which those who are not Catholic, I invite to delve into that. 2,000 years of study of the moral life of the conscience, which is for all people. So in those three areas, 1, believing in integrity, 2, building my own principles, and 3, following my conscience, we can almost be guaranteed of success in business. And as Ernst & Young, as in your personal life, Jim, 1, in believing these principles and living according to them, by the fruits you shall know them. And many of the questions are very good. Very good. How do you know that these principles, Ernst & Young, will be seen in the fruits of your work, in the individuals? Building relationships, as you said, around doing the right thing. Thank you. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Lord, we thank you for these words of wisdom today. We ask that we may take away clear principles of right living, acting, and thinking, that we may implement these principles of integrity, of honesty, of humility, of generosity, of forgiveness, of mercy, which we've all heard of today, and we will implement them in our own personal lives and professional lives. Help us not to doing what is right, but always to be courageous in doing what, for myself and for all those who are entrusted to me. We ask this through Christ our Lord.
Amen.